Hello and welcome. There's nothing you need to do tonight. Just settle in and let the story unfold at its own quiet pace. The evening always seemed to arrive a little earlier in the town square, as if the buildings leaned in together to invite the night. On this particular evening, the sky was settling into its softer colors, that quiet mix of pale blue and fading gold that comes just before the lamps flicker on. The narrator lived only a few streets away and passed through the square most nights, usually without thinking much about it. But tonight, as the air cooled and footsteps sounded slower on the stone, there was that familiar moment again. The old clock above the square cleared its throat, so to speak, and then struck the hour. Not quite on time, just a breath behind where it should have been. Long enough to notice, but never long enough to matter. The sound drifted gently across the open space, rounded by age and softened by distance, as if it had learned not to hurry anyone along. The narrator paused without realizing it, standing near the low fountain where the water murmured in a steady, patient way. No one else seemed surprised. A couple walking past continued at the same unhurried pace. A shopkeeper drew down a shade, careful and unbothered. The clock's small delay was simply part of the evening, like the way the light lingered on the windows just before leaving them dark. Living nearby meant growing used to these things. The square had its own habits, and the clock was one of them. It had been slightly slow for as long as the narrator could remember. Not broken, not ignored, just allowed. People set their watches by it anyway, or maybe because of it, knowing they would always have a little extra time. The narrator took a slow breath and listened as the last echo of the chime faded into the soft sounds of night beginning its work. Somewhere a door closed gently. Somewhere else, laughter rose and fell, unremarkable and kind. The clock face above glowed faintly now, steady and calm, content with its own pace. There was no rush to leave the square. Evening had only just begun, and time here, as always, seemed willing to wait. After lingering in the square a moment longer, the narrator began the familiar walk back through the surrounding streets. These were streets known by heart, where every crack in the pavement and every leaning fence felt quietly recognizable. The evening had settled in properly now, wrapping the neighborhood in a softer kind of sound. At the small workshop near the corner, the narrator paused to finish the last simple tasks of the day. Lights were dimmed rather than switched off all at once. A window was checked, then checked again, more out of habit than concern. The door closed with a gentle click, unhurried, as though it understood there was no need to rush. Down the street, others were doing the same in their own quiet ways. A shop owner stood chatting with a familiar customer, neither eager to end the conversation. Someone swept a doorstep slowly, brushing dust into neat lines that would be gone by morning. Voices drifted and softened, trailing off naturally when there was nothing more that needed saying. Every so often, the clock's presence could still be felt, even from here. Not the sound of it, but the idea of it. The knowledge that the hour had passed a little late seemed to loosen everyone's grip on the evening. Time felt wide enough, spacious. There was room to finish things properly. The narrator noticed how this changed the walk home. Steps slowed without effort, shoulders relaxed. The streets, warmed by lamplight, seemed to stretch themselves comfortably, inviting one more glance at a window or a doorway before moving on. By the time the last lock was turned and the keys rested quietly in the narrator's pocket, the night had found its rhythm. It was the kind that made small observations feel pleasant and easy and made it natural to notice how others shared the same gentle pace without ever speaking about it. As the narrator continued along the street, it became easy to notice the small ways people were settling into their own evenings. Nothing felt planned or hurried. It was simply the way the town moved when night approached, familiar and unremarkable in the best sense. Through the wide front window of the bakery, the baker was wiping down the long wooden counter. The cloth moved in slow, practiced circles, catching a faint dusting of flour that still lingered in the warm light. Trays were stacked neatly, not rushed, and the last light inside remained on, as if there was no reason to hurry the day away. A little farther on, the cafe owner was gathering chairs from the sidewalk. Each one was lifted and turned with care, metal legs brushing softly against stone. There was a pause between every few chairs, a glance up the street, a quiet nod to a passerby. The door stayed open longer than necessary, letting the smell of coffee fade naturally into the night air. Neighbors passed in small, comfortable moments. A couple exchanged a few unimportant words before parting ways. Someone lingered at a doorway, keys resting in their palm, not quite ready to go inside. No one checked the time. No one seemed concerned about it. The narrator noticed how these moments echoed one another, how each person moved as though guided by the same gentle understanding. The clock didn't need to be seen or heard. Its slower rhythm lived in these small gestures, in the pauses people allowed themselves without thinking. Walking on, the narrator felt surrounded by these quiet patterns, the kind that made an evening feel held together. It was easy in moments like this to begin wondering how such a simple habit had shaped the town for so long and why it felt so natural to follow along. It was during this part of the walk, when the streets grew quieter and footsteps became more spaced out, that the familiar question returned. It always arrived softly, without insisting on an answer. The narrator had wondered it many times before, usually at about this hour. Why had no one ever fixed the clock? It wasn't broken in any obvious way. The hands still moved, the face still glowed when night came, the chime still rang out, steady and clear, just a little late. Anyone passing through town for the first time noticed it eventually. Anyone who stayed long enough simply learned it. The narrator slowed slightly, listening to the hush between sounds. Somewhere, a window was being closed. Somewhere else, a radio murmured faintly before being turned down. These were not the kinds of evenings that called for precise minutes. Over the years, there had been chances, new officials, brief discussions, a mention in passing during a meeting. Someone would always say it should be looked at someday, and then the conversation would drift on to something else, as if the thought had completed itself without action. The narrator realized the question never felt urgent. It felt more like remembering a story already known, one that didn't need a final chapter. The clock's slowness had become part of how evenings unfolded here, woven into routines so quietly that fixing it might feel like an interruption. As the narrator continued home, the thought settled gently, resting alongside the soft sounds of night. It was enough for now simply to notice it again and to let the evening continue at its own unhurried pace. By the time the narrator reached home, the street had grown comfortably dim, the kind of dimness that made indoor light feel especially kind. The door closed with a familiar sound, soft and certain, and the quiet inside welcomed them without ceremony. A small lamp was switched on in the kitchen, casting a warm circle across the counter. Nothing bright, nothing sharp, just enough light to soften the edges of the room. The kettle was filled slowly, the tap turned off with care and set in place as if there were no reason to hurry it along. Somewhere in the distance, the clock's chime drifted through the evening air. It arrived a little late, as it always did, and somehow that made it easier to listen to. The narrator took the sound as a gentle suggestion rather than a signal, letting it mark the moment without claiming it. As the water warmed, the house settled. Steam began to rise, faint at first, then steady, fogging the air just slightly. A cup was chosen from the cupboard, one that felt right in the hand, its surface worn smooth from use. Tea leaves were measured without looking too closely, guided by habit more than precision. Outside, the last passing footsteps faded. A distant door closed. The world seemed to draw in around itself, growing quieter with each small sound that disappeared. Inside, the kettle reached its gentle boil, not loud, not demanding, simply ready. The narrator poured the water slowly, watching the color deepen in the cup, listening to the soft sound it made as it filled. There was time to stand there for a moment afterward, hands warming, breath steady, as the evening continued to settle into something calm and familiar. As the tea cooled just enough to sip, the narrator found their thoughts drifting back through the years, following the steady rhythm the clock had quietly set. It was easy to trace its influence once noticed. The town had learned its timing without ever agreeing to it out loud. Meetings rarely began exactly when planned. No one minded. People arrived with coats still on, greetings unhurried, conversations finishing naturally before settling into their seats. The clock allowed a few extra minutes for people to arrive as themselves, not as punctual obligations. Children wandered home from school in loose groups, stopping to look at interesting stones or to finish a story. No one called after them to hurry along. Parents trusted the daylight, trusted the street, trusted the clock that seemed to suggest there was still time. Evenings stretched in a similar way. Shops stayed open just a little longer than the signs suggested. Suppers waited patiently on stoves. Walks around the block turned into 2, then sometimes 3, without any sense of having taken too long. These patterns repeated themselves day after day until they no longer felt like choices. They felt like the natural shape of time here. The clock's slight delay had softened the edges of the day, rounding moments so they could be held more comfortably. Sitting there, cup warming their hands, the narrator felt how familiar this rhythm had become. It was steady without being strict, predictable without being tight, and in that gentle predictability, there was a quiet comfort, one that made it easy to notice how everything seemed to move together without effort into the rest of the night. Later that evening, with the cup now resting empty by the sink, the narrator stepped back outside for a brief walk. The air had cooled further, carrying the faint, clean smell of night. Not far from the building, a familiar neighbor was moving slowly along the path, coat buttoned carefully, steps measured and sure. They exchanged a quiet greeting, the kind that didn't need to be raised above the evening. The neighbor glanced toward the square, where the clock's soft glow could just be seen between rooftops, and smiled in a knowing way. "Still taking its time," the neighbor said gently, more amused than concerned. The narrator nodded, sharing the small smile that followed. There was no discussion of repairs or schedules, no suggestion that anything needed changing, just a brief acknowledgement, as if they were speaking about the weather or the turning of the seasons. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, listening to the quiet. The clock chimed again, arriving just after expected, and neither of them reacted beyond a soft breath of recognition. It was a sound that belonged to both of them and to everyone else who lived within reach of it. When they parted, it felt easy and complete. The narrator continued down the path with a lighter step, carrying the warmth of that small exchange. It was comforting to know that this understanding was shared, unspoken but steady, woven gently into the night and into the time that followed. Once alone again, the narrator let the quiet settle fully around them. The street had grown still in that comfortable way that comes after most doors have closed and most lights have dimmed. Footsteps were rare now, and when they did pass, they sounded unhurried, as though even they understood the tone of the evening. Walking slowly, the narrator considered how different the days might feel if the clock kept perfect time. It was hard to imagine, really. The slowness had been there so long that urgency never quite took hold. Appointments stretched gently at the edges. Goodbyes were never rushed. Small delays were met with patience rather than worry. There was a sense that the town had learned this together over years of living side by side. No one had been taught it directly. It had simply happened, shaped by a clock that allowed moments to finish properly. Conversations reached their natural ends. Tasks were completed without being forced along. The narrator paused briefly, listening to the faint hum of night sounds settling into place. A distant light flickered off. Somewhere, a curtain was drawn. These were the quiet signals that the day was releasing its hold. Standing there, breathing slowly, it felt clear that time here was not something to be chased. It moved alongside the people who lived within it, steady and forgiving. And with that thought resting comfortably, the narrator continued on, carrying the calm of it into the next stretch of the evening. As the narrator walked on, a simple understanding settled into place, as quiet as everything else that evening. It arrived without effort, without needing to be worked through. The clock hadn't been fixed because no one truly wanted it to be. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't delay. It was something closer to agreement, though never spoken aloud. The town had found comfort in those extra moments the clock allowed, and over time they had come to expect them. The narrator thought of how often the clock offered a pause, a few more minutes to finish a sentence, a few more steps before saying goodnight, a few more breaths before moving on to whatever came next. The slowness made room for these things, and no one seemed eager to give that up. There was a gentle relief in seeing it this way. Nothing was neglected, nothing was out of order. The clock was doing exactly what it had been allowed to do, keeping time in a manner that suited the people who lived beneath it. The realization felt steady, not surprising. It rested easily, like a well-worn habit. And with that calm understanding in mind, the narrator continued through the quiet streets, letting the evening carry on without asking it to move any faster. The night had settled fully by the time the narrator returned to the quiet comfort of home. One by one, windows along the street darkened, as if the town itself was drawing a soft curtain over the day. The sounds of life had softened into distant echoes, gentle and measured, fading without notice. From somewhere above, the familiar chime of the old clock drifted through the evening air. It arrived a little later than expected, as always, carrying no insistence, no hurry. The sound felt steady and reliable, a companion rather than a signal, marking the evening in its own gentle way. The narrator moved through the home with ease, closing shutters, arranging pillows, and setting the last small things in place. Every motion was unhurried, each breath steady, each small action flowing naturally, guided by the calm rhythm of the town around them. There was no need to rush. The night was complete in its quiet unfolding. The streets, the windows, the soft echo of the clock, they all carried a sense of contentment, a gentle agreement that this was the time to rest and to let the world slow for a little while longer. As the narrators settled into their own familiar corner of the evening, there was space to simply be, with the town breathing softly around them and the old clock keeping its patient watch. Now, as the night settles deeper and sleep begins to tiptoe close, the narrator allows themselves one last quiet thought. There is comfort in knowing that time here does not demand anything. It does not rush, it does not press, and it does not hurry. The old clock continues its gentle watch, chiming softly when it chooses, marking hours in a way that feels patient and understanding. It reminds the narrator, and anyone who listens, that not every moment needs to be measured or counted. Some nights are simply meant to unfold, slowly, with space to breathe, to notice, to rest. The warmth of the evening lingers in the air. The faint sounds of the town, softened and distant, mingle with the steady rhythm of the clock. There is a sense of permission here, permission to pause, to linger, to arrive at rest without worry or haste. And as the narrator leans back, letting the calm fill them, there is a gentle ease in the knowing that some time waits for you, always, that the world can slow down when it matters most. And in that quiet, patient slowing, the mind and body can begin to settle, carrying the comfort of the evening softly into sleep. There's nothing more to follow tonight. I'm Clara Hale, wishing you a calm, comfortable rest.